I got into radio as a kid. I was the kid who drove his bicycle to the radio station when I was in high school. So when I was, you know, in 10th, 11th grade, I was reading the school lunch menus over the air, you know, in Oil City, Pennsylvania, where the only thing but cows heard you. You know, it was a small little radio station in my town. But by the time I graduated high school, I knew radio. So I was on my own basically just hung out at the radio station and was like the mascot. Pretty soon, hey, I'm going to go, you know, go get my smokes, Jimmy, or get me a pizza, or hey, by the way, while I leave, you'll put this record on, do this, and I learned radio off the street. And then my career led me to a station in Ohio that I worked at in Cleveland, Ohio, WMMS Radio. And then the program director, radio is very common for when the program directors come and go, and many times they'll take you with you. And what ended up happening was he ended up getting a job in San Francisco and said, look, why don't you come out and I'll give you a job out there. So my career in radio led me out to San Francisco, and I was like 20, 21 years old. Part of my job was to do some commercials, and I did one for the Columbia School of Broadcasting. And, you know, I just did their commercial for them. And the general manager came down to the school and, or came to the station, and he said, hey, I really like what you did with the commercial. Would you like to come and talk to some broadcasting students? And I said, sure. And he said, you know, I'll pay you a few $100. So I went and I talked to people about what it was like to be in radio. And then he said, look, would you like to teach? And I was, you know, like 22, long-haired kid at the time, and I go, you know, on the side, we'll pay you, you know, to come and teach radio. And so I started teaching broadcasting at the, you know, infamous, at that time, they were very, you know, they had 30 schools, federal aid. And at that time, this was like the mid-'80s, the tuition was about $3,000, you know, which at that time was, you know, maybe $4,000. And it was but what ended up happening was, first of all, the curriculum was very old, very outdated, and I got a real whiff of, you know, there were several problems with it. First of all, I became friends with some of my students, and they're like, Jimmy, how do I get a job? And my first few students, I knew guys in the market, so I would get, you know, but after 2 or 3 hitting up my program directors, you know, I couldn't get everybody a job because this was I was teaching at their San Jose school. So and they were really all about, you know, running admissions, enrolling. Everything about it was just like, you know, kind of backward. And what ended up happening was I actually said, look, they said, look, why don't you stay with us and write a program? And we'll use your program, and maybe we can make some changes on our course. So I wrote a course on how to get into, on a radio broadcasting course. I modeled theirs, but I updated it. I mean, it was amazing to me that they were talking about publications, for example, that didn't even exist to go out. I mean, the course was so old and outdated, I thought you'd think they had some restrictions or guidelines, but it was amazing. And after I finished writing the course, they basically, I said, look, I basically went to them with this idea. I said, look, I've got a great idea, guys. They were having some problems at the time. They were close to losing their federal aid. I said, perfect. Why don't you shut down all your schools, and why don't you get people into radio as interns? I says, I've got I actually had this great idea that I gave them. I says, why don't you do this? I said, you know, get the guy in a radio station, offer the program director to train them one-on-one. That way the kid's in the door. It's one-on-one. It's personalized. And they kind of laughed at it. They were like, Jimmy, you know, we have schools and everything else. So basically what ended up happening was after I wrote the course, and I could see that I didn't believe in what they were doing. I thought, well, let me try to do this. And I had no money at the time or anything, so I called up a couple radio stations that I knew the general managers in the Bay Area, and I said, look, I'll make you a deal. You run my ads for people that want to get into radio. They call me, and I screen them over the phone. Now, if they seem to have a good voice and really want to do it, you interview them, but here's the deal. If you interview them and they don't have it, deal's off. If you interview them and you're like, yeah, this person has some potential, we'll charge them $2,000. I'll give you half, you give me half, and you train them with this course. And that's how I started it.